Hello again, I'm Rani Kudal, International Lifestyle Coach and NLP practitioner. Today I'm going to be speaking to you about denial and delusion. Do you ever speak to any of your friends and when they're speaking you're thinking, this person's in serious denial here, or like they're completely delusional about this? For example, if you're speaking to one of your girlfriends and she's talking about this guy who she thinks is really seriously interested in her, but you've got the facts and you're thinking, she's just deluding herself here. It's not that situation whatsoever. To say that someone is delusional is to accuse them of living in a fantasy world. But what is reality? If we believe it, then it's our reality. Now, the point in which this becomes dangerous is when we start to ignore all the other facts that are around us. Human nature is to see what we want to choose to see, but to neglect the whole picture is something that may cause us suffering. In my article that I've written about this, I give 3 examples of clients that I've worked with in the past, and of course I've changed their names and their identities a little bit, but it'll give you a good illustration of the point that I'm trying to make over here. So my first lady, her name was Mrs. Teary. Every time she'd turn up to a session she'd be crying, she was very upset, and she would say things like, I just don't understand. I mean, he tells me that he loves me and he says that he wants to marry me and he's talking about having children with me, and yet he won't commit for me to be his girlfriend or to call me his girlfriend. And so when Miss Teary would speak to her girlfriends, they would say, oh no, you're lovely, it's him, he's an emotional fuckwit, or oh, you know, don't worry, you're doing everything right. And so they were actually enabling this situation for her and not helping her very much at all. So encouraged by her friends, she decided to give this guy, her boyfriend, an ultimatum, which was, you're either going to be with me or you're not. And so he decided to not. So when she actually came to me, she was pretty upset, really devastated, and she just didn't understand what was going on. So I knew that I didn't have the whole picture here, and I probed for more. And eventually there were expressions like, well, he told me that he loved me, but he didn't want to have a serious relationship. Or he told me that he would like to get married to me, but he was nowhere near ready. Or so on and so forth. There were all these other comments that he had actually justified himself or explained himself to her to say that I'm just not ready for a relationship even though I think you're great. So there was parts of it that she decided to listen to or to take on board, and by actually denying the other part of it, she had created herself suffering. Delusion and denial are very similar. Delusion is when you tell yourself that reality or the facts that are there may actually seem to be different in your reality. And denial is even when the facts are there and you are able to register them in your reality, that you actually refuse to accept them. Denying things can actually cause energy blocks in your body. How many times have you yourself done this, or heard your friends actually denying evidence when it's just there for you to accept and act upon? I'm going to tell you about another client of mine, and I've called him Mr. Melancholy. So a few years ago, Mr. Melancholy decided that it was time for him to get married, and he then chose this object of affection, which was a lady that used to work with him. He then decided to use his flash the cash tactics to endear this lady into dating him, which worked very well. So they had these few dates in which they ended up having a little bit of a physical relationship, but nothing else much eventuated from this, because she learned very fast that he was looking for something much more serious, and that was something that she was not interested in, and therefore she decided to end their alliance. So Mr. Melancholy was quite upset by this and decided to continue to message her, call her and pursue her, and absolutely refused to see any of the evidence that she wasn't returning his text messages or his phone calls, and that she just wasn't interested. For him, in his reality, that did not register. So Mr. Melancholy decided to step it up a notch. He decided to use some mutual friends of theirs at work to gain access to her, and also to gain access to where she was living, to her house. So eventually she decided to move out. Mr. Melancholy had actually even gone to extremes of sleeping with one of her friends just to get access to her house. So this lady had decided to actually just completely get away from him, and her friends and their mutual friends had started to label him as a bit of a psycho stalker. He, however, did not acknowledge any of this or realise that he had done anything that would have been out of the norm. In his reality, he was doing the right thing. So what triggered Mr. Melancholy to come and see me and get some help was that after pursuing this lady for almost another year without any response from her, without her responding to any messages, emails, text messages, anything, he finally tracked her down at her new place of employment. He turned up there only to find that she was in another relationship, and she was happily in love and planning a long-term future with someone else. The fact was so alien to him that it actually had shocked him into realising that what was he doing? You know, he had been obsessing over this woman for practically 2 years, and she had no interest in him whatsoever. So he and I started to do some work together. The first thing that he said to me was, I just don't get it. If she just wasn't interested in me, why didn't she tell me? I'm also going to tell you about another lady of mine, another client, and I'm going to call her Miss Down. Now, every single time she met one of her friends for a coffee or for a glass of wine, she would continually talk about this relationship that had ended over 5 years ago. And she would remember it as being the happiest time of her life, and that this man was her dream man, and that she was devastated that everything was over. Her friends would continually tell her that that's not the way they saw it, that she was actually deluding herself, that the facts actually pointed to a completely different picture. So eventually her friends stopped talking to her because they were really bored about the same conversation every single time they met. Now, what do you do if one of your friends is like Miss Teary or Mr. Melancholy or Miss Down? Or what if it's you that's exhibiting those behaviours where you're not seeing facts, or you're actually refusing to accept the facts there, or you're allowing yourself to sit in denial or delusion? The first thing is, it's important not to judge them, because for them that's their reality or their comfort zone. There's some reason that they or you are staying there at this moment. Second is to be aware that there are 5 stages of recovery when it comes to being in denial. The first is denial and isolation. The second is feeling really angry about it. The third is bargaining. You bargain with yourself. Fourth is a state of depression. And then the 5th stage is acceptance. 5 stages of recovery are: the first is being aware of your denial and isolation. The second is anger. The third is bargaining. That's both with yourself and others. The 4th is a state of depression. And 5th and foremost is acceptance, and that's when the healing will begin. So what happened to my clients? Well, Miss Teary and I did some sessions, and she decided to actually change her name to Miss Kickass, and she made a commitment to herself to see the full picture from now on. She eventually met somebody a few months later, and a couple of years after that they got married, and she's very happy, and she continues to take full responsibility with her husband as well. Mr. Melancholy and I continue with our work. He realised that by refusing to see some of the details, that he was not only causing others suffering but deeply suffering himself. So there are times that he does fall into his old patterns, but we do continue with our work and he's a lot better now. Miss Down decided that she was really comfortable in delusion, and so she decided to move to another state and make more friends. Thanks for your time today, guys.